Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to today's lesson on one-step equations. Alright, so for the past few lessons, we've worked with combining polynomials, multiplying, dividing polynomials, like terms, all that kind of stuff. But today, starting from this unit, we're actually going to figure out what x actually is. Because in the past few units, we don't really have any equal signs. We just have an expression, here's a clump, combine them together. But now, we got equal signs, which means that we can actually figure out what this x or whatever variable actually is. So, the most important thing to remember is that an equal sign in algebra, right? An equal sign is pretty much the same thing as a balance. Right? So think of it as a balancing a scale. Right? Both sides of the equal sign has to be the same. Right? So in order to do that, we've done a few of those problems already, where I talked about, oh, if this plus this equals to this, then what is this question mark? Right? And now to really put it into practice, whenever we solve those equations, right, we have to isolate the variable and apply inverse operations. Right, so we make the variables by themselves and then do the inverse operations. So what does that even mean? Right, so inverse operations is literally just the opposite of an operation. So the inverse of plus 2 is minus 2. Right? Minus 8 is plus 8. Times 10 is divided by 10. Right? Times negative 7, or divided by negative 7 is just times negative 7. Okay, that's it. There's no tricks here. It's just the opposite of the operation. So why do we actually care about this? So let's say we have our question here, x plus 2 equals to 5, which is pretty much asking, if a number plus 2 equals to 5, what's that number? And all we have to do is to do the inverse operations. Right? We want x to be by itself, which means that we have to somehow move this plus 2 over there. Because if we can somehow scooch the plus 2 over, right, then x will be by itself. Right? We do not want this 2 here. But obviously, in math, we cannot just eliminate a number for fun. So what we do instead is, okay, what we can do the inverse operation. So we can subtract 2 from both sides. Right, so remember, it's a scale. Whatever you do to on one side, you got to do to the other. So what we can do now is, okay, on the left-hand side right here, we have x plus 2 minus 2, right? And of course, 2 minus 2 is 0. So we just have x by itself now. And on the right-hand side, we got 5 minus 2, which is 3. And that is our answer. Right? That's it. We're just doing the inverse operation. We want x to be by itself. Right? And what that means is whatever variables that we have, we just want the variable to be on one side of the equal sign. It doesn't matter if it's the left side or right side, as long as it is by itself, that's all that matters. So let's try next one here. 7a equals to 56. Right, so as a reminder, right, 7a is the same thing as 7 times a. Right, equals to 56. Right, or, right, you can think of it as, right, again, it's going to use a different sign here. So all three of those means to multiply. Right, 7 dot, this dot right here means to multiply. Of course, got a multiplication sign. If you do not see a sign between a number and a variable, that also just means to multiply. The reason why we don't write the x here is because the multiplication sign here is because it looks like x, right? This looks like 7xa. That's the reason why we don't actually write it all the time. But anyways, 7 times a equals to 56. We want a to be by itself, so we do the inverse operation. 7 times a, the inverse is 7a divided by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. Right, equals to 56 divided by 7. Right, and of course, as we remember, if we have 1 times a, or 1 times anything, it's just that thing. So we don't actually have to write the 1. Right? 56 divided by 7 is 8. That's it. Okay. Moving on with division here. Right, so exact same thing. b divided by negative 3 is 8. Right? We want b to be by itself. So we can multiply everything by negative 3. Right? Because then divided by negative 3 times negative 3 is the same thing as just 1. Right? Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. And then we have 8 times negative 3, negative 24. Right, if you're ever unsure, you can always plug your answer back in. You can do a little double check. Double check. Right. If b is negative 24, right, then negative 24 divided by negative 3. Right, I'm just plugging this negative 24 back into the b here. Right, that's positive 8. Right? So you can always double check your answer by plugging your answer back into the equation. Now last one here. We have negative 2 over 3 times c. So inverse operations, we can divide everything by negative 2 over 3. Right, just like that. So c is then by itself. We got 6 divided by negative 2 over 3, which is the same thing as 6 times negative 3 over 2. Right? Because dividing a fraction, just multiplying the flip version of it. We can reduce ahead. 2 and the 6 can be reduced down to 1 and the 3. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Right, that's pretty much it. Alright, so this is what we call one-step equations because we're only doing one step, right? We are only applying the inverse operation one time. And yeah, that's it for today's lesson. The next few lessons we'll practice with more complicated equations. But for now, I just want y'all to get used to the inverse operations. Right, so always remember, the variable has to be on one side, doesn't matter which side, and everything else is on the other side. Alright, that's all. Good luck practicing.